Sufi poet Rumi once said, "Out beyond ideas of wrongdoing and right-doing, there is a field. I'll meet you there." In the chaos of life, some conversations uplift us, while others drain our energy. This emotional impact often comes from the words and language we use. Psychologist Marshall explored this topic deeply, wondering, what helps us stay connected to our compassionate nature even in tough situations? Through his research, he found that language has the power to connect us to our compassionate selves. In 1999, Marshall published the book Nonviolent Communication, writing about the method to change how we express ourselves and listen to others in a compassionate way, while also avoiding conflicts. Now, let me take you through the key ideas of this interesting book. Key idea 1, life-alienating communication. Let's start by discussing some communication habits that can harm our relationships. Moralistic judgments, comparisons, denials of responsibility, and making demands. The author refers to these as life-alienating communication. Now, let's talk about the first type, moralistic judgment, which involves labeling others with negative characteristics like, "You're too selfish," "She's lazy," "They're prejudiced," or "That's inappropriate." When people hear such labels, they often feel blamed and may become defensive or even retaliate, which strains our relationships. If we dig deeper, we might realize these labels are just our subjective judgments based on our beliefs. When someone's actions match our expectations, we consider them right. But when they don't, we label them wrong. There's a humorous example in the book that highlights our subjectivity. If a colleague pays more attention to detail than we do, we might call them picky and compulsive. But if we are more detail-oriented than our colleague, we might see them as sloppy and disorganized. Understanding this helps us see how our judgments are often more about our perspectives than the actual characteristics of others. The second type of life-alienating communication is comparing others. Comparison is similar to judgment, where we decide what's right and wrong among people. It hurts to hear and feels like an unwanted force to change. We need to remember that people only truly change when they see the benefit for themselves. It is often seen with many Asian parents who compare their children's accomplishments with others. They overlook that every person in this world is unique, both in appearance and how they perceive information. Remember, every flower blooms in its own time. Instead of blaming and comparing children, it's more beneficial to encourage them and let them explore to discover their own talents. The way we talk often obscure our responsibility for our own thoughts, feelings, and actions. That is the third kind of life-alienating communication, which is denial of responsibility. We've all heard phrases like, "There are some things you just have to do, whether you like it or not." Such expressions make it seem like we don't have a choice in our actions. Another example is saying, "You make me feel guilty," which suggests we aren't in control of our own emotions. The problem with this kind of language is that it implies we have no choices. But most of the time, we do. For instance, at the start of one of Marshall's workshops, a woman complained, "When I leave here tonight, I have to go home and cook. I hate cooking. I hate it with a passion, but I've been doing it every day for 20 years, even when I've been as sick as a dog, because it's one of those things you just have to do." By the end of the workshop, she decided to tell her family she no longer wanted to cook. 3 weeks later, her eldest son came to another workshop and said, "Marshall, I just said to myself, 'Thank God.'" Seeing my puzzled look, he explained, "I thought to myself, maybe finally she won't be complaining at every meal." Marshall suggests that we should use language that acknowledges our choices instead of denying them. By doing so, we maintain clarity in our communications and recognize our ability to change our circumstances. There's a quote from George Bernanos in this book that I really like. I have thought for a long time now that if, someday, the increasing efficiency for the technique of destruction finally causes our species to disappear from the earth, it will not be cruelty that will be responsible for our extinction, and still less, of course, the indignation that cruelty awakens and the reprisals and vengeance that it brings upon itself, but the docility, the lack of responsibility of the modern man, his base, subservient acceptance of every common decree. The horrors that we have seen, the still greater horrors we shall presently see, are not signs that rebels, insubordinate, untamable men are increasing in number throughout the world, but rather that there is a constant increase in the number of obedient, docile men. Next, let's talk about another aspect of life-alienating communication: demands. Demands occur when we explicitly or implicitly make people do things for us, often threatening them with blame or punishment if they don't comply. For example, saying, "You must clean your room right now," or "Just follow my instructions and don't ask questions." When people hear a demand, they feel a lack of choice and may comply out of fear rather than genuine willingness. This coercive and controlling approach can lead to resistance, resentment, and damaged relationships. It also hinders open and honest communication, as people might be afraid of blame to express genuinely. Parents, teachers, or managers who think their main responsibility is to change people's behavior often resort to demands. However, demands don't always work well. Instead, we should consider making a request. A request is based on your own feelings and needs and asks for the other person's help. When people hear a request, they have the choice to say yes or no, and their focus now turn to your need. For instance, instead of saying, "You must clean your room right now," you could say, "I feel stressed when the house is messy because I need order. Can you clean your room today?" Making a request promotes positive and cooperative interaction, encouraging responses based on mutual understanding and willingness. We'll discuss how to make effective requests in more detail later in this video, so stay tuned. Key idea. 2. Separate observations from evaluations. The first step in nonviolent communication (NVC) is to separate observations from evaluations. An evaluation is a judgment, analysis, or assessment that adds a subjective interpretation to a situation, behavior, or individual. These evaluations often carry a judgmental tone, which others can easily pick up on, leading to defensiveness or resistance. For instance, saying, "You are so unreliable" is an evaluation. In contrast, observations describe what is actually happening without adding emotions or personal perspectives. Instead of making evaluations, NVC encourages focusing on your own feelings and needs. For example, rather than saying, "You never listen to me," you could say, "When I talk to you and you look away, I feel ignored because I need to feel heard." What we see doesn't always tell us the whole truth. So, before judging someone, let's use our ability to observe and avoid jumping to conclusions immediately. By taking responsibility for our words, we can avoid harming others. This approach helps nurture our relationships and makes them stronger and more positive. Key idea 3. Express feelings. Have you ever watched a touching movie and found yourself sharing the same emotions as the actors, even shedding tears despite knowing the film isn't real? Emotions come from our hearts. They easily spread and attract empathy from others. Emotions are something we cannot easily control. They are pure and natural, unlike the sophisticated thoughts from our brains. If you pay attention, you'll notice that conflicts in communication often arise from unmet needs and unexpressed emotions. Sadly, we live in a world where emotions are not considered important. We grow up with strict moral standards about what is good and what is bad. Many parents tell their sons that boys must be strong and not cry. Over time, we bury our emotions deep within our hearts. Not easily expressing emotions is quite common. A young man who attended the author's workshop shared how he was woken up every night by his roommate playing loud music. He said, "I feel that it isn't right to play music so loud at night." Do you think he was expressing his emotions? The answer is no. This young man was actually stating his opinion rather than expressing a feeling. We often make such mistakes when trying to express emotions. Remember the first step of the NVC method. Separate observation from evaluation. At this point, according to the NVC method, he should focus on observing the situation. For example, saying, "My roommate has played the stereo late at night and loudly for a week." Next, he needs to look deeply into his own feelings. How is he feeling? Perhaps he feels annoyed and tired because he cannot sleep. By focusing on the situation and then his own feelings, he might say, "My roommate has played the stereo late at night and loudly for a week. I feel so annoyed and tired because I need a quiet environment to sleep." By expressing his feelings, he attracts the listener's empathy. The listener's focus is now on the current situation and the speaker's emotions instead of feeling judged and putting up a defensive wall. Remember that judging and labeling others, such as calling them lazy, inconsiderate, or cold, are statements that easily hurt and offend others, leading to defensiveness. Such judgments attack the other person's self-esteem and can cause deep emotional wounds. When we express our feelings, it's important to be clear with ourselves first. This means really looking deep into our emotions and understanding them before sharing. The purpose here is to take care of our feelings and express them accurately. Sometimes we say, "I feel good," but good is very general. It could mean happy, excited, relieved, or any number of other emotions. Using vague terms like good or bad makes it harder for the listener to connect with what we're truly feeling. Additionally, we might say things like, "I feel ignored," or "I feel unimportant." These words don't describe our inner feelings. They reflect our interpretations of others' behaviors. In these cases, our actual feelings might be hurt, frustrated, or discouraged. When communicating, try to first observe what's actually happening, and then take a moment to reflect on your own emotions and feelings. Describe your perspective thoughtfully, so others can understand where you're coming from. Key idea 4, express needs. The third component of the nonviolent communication, NVC method, is expressing needs. We often believe that what others do and say is the root cause of our feelings, but that's not entirely accurate. While others' actions can trigger our emotions, they are not the direct cause. Our feelings actually stem from how we interpret those actions and our own needs and expectations at the time. Every negative emotion points to an unmet need. Needs aren't just practical, like food, clothing, or sleep. They also include emotional and spiritual needs, such as respect and care. When we clearly express our needs, it's more likely they will be met. However, articulating our needs clearly can be challenging. In a society where identifying and expressing needs is often judged harshly, it can be intimidating to do so. This is especially true for women, who are often expected to prioritize others' needs over their own. Now, we've learned how to express our feelings and needs, but what should we do when we're on the receiving end of a negative comment? For instance, imagine someone says, "You're the most self-centered person I've ever met." There are 4 possible ways to respond to this situation. The first way is to take the blame. You might say, "Oh, I should have been more sensitive." While this response seems reasonable, it can have negative effects on both you and the other person. Taking all the responsibility can leave you feeling hurt, upset, and lower your self-esteem. The second option is to blame the speaker. You might respond, "You have no right to say that. I always consider your needs." This reaction can make both parties angry and defensive, leading to ongoing conflict. These responses are natural, but rarely effective. According to the Nonviolent Communication (NVC) method, there are more constructive ways to handle such situations. One approach is to focus on your own feelings and needs. You might respond, "When I hear you say that I'm the most self-centered person you've ever met, I feel hurt because I need some recognition for my efforts to be considerate." Another approach is to consider the other person's feelings and needs. For example, you could ask, "Are you feeling hurt because you need more consideration for your preferences?" Using these methods can help turn a negative interaction into an opportunity for understanding and connection. This concludes part 1 of my summary of the book, Nonviolent Communication. In part 2, I'll explore the later chapters, covering topics such as making requests, receiving with empathy, and fully expressing anger. If you find this content helpful, please subscribe to this channel and click the bell icon to turn on notifications. That way, you'll be notified whenever I publish a new video. Thank you for listening.